Okay. Good evening, all. Welcome to tonight's licensing committee meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. My name is Councillor Natalia Perez, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. If I lose connection and can't reconnect, Councillor Fiona Smith will take over for me. I'd like to remind all participants of a few housekeeping points. Please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking. When prompted, you may indicate you wish to speak, but please wait until I call on you before speaking fully. I also ask that members keep their questions and comments brief and to the point, please. If any councillor leaves the meeting or loses connection during an item, we will pause and wait a few minutes for them to reconnect. If a councillor is not present for a substantial part of the discussion of an item, they will not be included in the deliberations. The quorum for this meeting is 2 members of the committee. If you have fewer than 2 members in attendance, I will have to adjourn the meeting. Before we start with formal proceedings, I would like to please have 1 minute silence. Some of you may have heard that sadly we have lost one of our councillors, Councillor Colin Ahern, sadly passed away at the weekend, and in his memory, I would like to have 1 minute. He was a very hard-working, dedicated councillor for over 35 years of his life, committed to representing the residents, and he was actually part of the licensing committee and subcommittees for 35 years. So in his memory, I would like to please have 1 minute silence. Thank you very much. Thank you. I would now like to start the meeting and move on to agenda item number 1, apologies for absence, and we have no apologies this evening. Agenda item number 2, roll call and declaration of interests. I will now do a roll call to confirm the members in attendance. When called on, please say present and note any declarations of interest. Councillor Smith?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thorley?
Present, Chair.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 3, Riverside Studios, 101 Queen Caroline Street, London, W69BN. I'd like to ask everyone participating this evening to please introduce yourself as I call on you. We should have with us the applicant's licensing solicitor, Mr. Craig Bayliss.
Hello, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
Good evening. Thank you. The Executive Director for Riverside Studios, Mr. Tony Lancaster.
Good evening, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
Good evening. The Council's Licensing Officer, Ms. Maria Dimitru.
Present, Chair.
Good evening. The Council's Licensing Officer, Lisa White.
Unfortunately, Lisa is not with us today, but I'm here, Chair Christina Perez, Licensing Committee Officer.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perez. We also have the Council's Legal Officer, Gerta Kuthelaj.
Good evening, Chair. Present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murphy, PJ Murphy. Councillor objecting this evening?
Present, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We should also have with us Shirley Cooper, Chair of the Queen Caroline Estate Tenants and Residents Association.
Thank you, Chair. I'm present.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cooper. We should also have with us Mr. Mike White on behalf of Hammersmith. Mr. Mike White.
Chair, he hasn't joined, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. We should also have Ms. Jane Bain.
Hello, yes, I'm here. I can also pass on, if Mike doesn't join us, I can pass on the contents of the meeting to him afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bain. We should also have Ms. Nicola Grant.
Hi, yes, I'm calling from New York. I'm here. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Carol Easton.
He hasn't joined, Chair.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Mary Stowe. I am speaking on behalf of Chancellor's Wharf for Carol Easton, Dr. Carol Easton. She asked me to speak.
Oh, thank you very much for the clarification. Stowe. Okay, we should also have Mr. Andy Costain.
Well, I'm sorry, I always cause confusion. I'm Anne-Marie Costain, but I come from Andy Costain. Yeah, present.
Okay, Anne-Marie. We should also have Karen McDonald.
Yes, I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Gregory.
She hasn't joined, Chair.
Okay. And Mr. Fred Johnson.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. James Donald.
He hasn't joined, Chair.
He's just sent me his apologies. Something has detained him, but I think I can represent his views.
Thank you. Mr. Peter Lovell.
I'm present, Chair.
Good evening. Thank you very much. And we should also have Mr. Philip McDonald.
Present, Chair.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much. Procedure. So before we consider the application today, please may I quickly explain the procedure the committee will follow. We will hear from the following. The licensing officer will introduce the application. Sorry, did I miss you, Ms. So.
No, you didn't, Chair. You're fine.
Okay, thank you. I thought you wanted to speak. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will first hear from the licensing officer, then from all the residents which have made representations in objection. Then I will invite the ward councillor, which has also made a written representation in objection, Councillor PJ Murphy, and then I'll invite the applicant's licensing solicitor, and the other representatives of Riverside Studios. Usually, each party will address the committee for a maximum of 3 minutes, and for this evening, and bearing in mind the number of objectors that we'll have with us this evening, I'm going to use chair's discretion and limit it to 3 minutes. However, we would welcome your representation. If you could please keep your representation short, that would be appreciated. Following the presentation by all parties, the committee may ask questions of any party or other person present at the hearing. No party has the right to ask questions of any other party at any time during the hearing. Following the presentation and questioning, each party will be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to sum up their case or representation. The committee will then retire for deliberations upon its return. I will announce the committee's decision. Okay, and I would like to please invite.
No, it's Mr. Bayliss, the applicant's solicitor. I do have some amendments to make to the application. I don't know if you want to hear those before you hear from Maria or after you've heard Maria's presentation, so that the residents are aware of the application in its amended format.
Have the residents had an opportunity to listen to hear from this change about these changes?
Chair, no, we've only just, I had a meeting with the clients this afternoon and we've only just agreed these amendments. So I'd like to put them to the committee now so that you're aware of them, because it would be pointless, obviously, the residents challenging an application which would not be the application which would be before the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Bayliss. I want to stick to the procedure that we have in place, and you will have an opportunity to address the concerns and also reference the changes that you are suggesting. And just to note as well that I will give you a fair amount of time, the same time that I will give to all the objectors together. So you will have plenty of time as well. Thank you very much. I would like to invite Ms. Maria Dimitru, please, to introduce the application.
Thank you, Chair. On the 10th of May, Riverside Trust submitted an application for a new premises license to be granted in respect of the premises known as Riverside Studios 101 Queen Caroline Street. The applicant has applied for a new premises license for the performance of a play, exhibition of a film, performance of live music, playing of recorded music, performance of dance, all these to take place indoors only, Monday to Sunday, 9 a.m. till 12:30 a.m., as well as provision of late night refreshment, indoors only, Monday to Sunday, 11 p.m. till midnight, and the sale of alcohol on the premises only, Monday to Sunday, 11 a.m. till 11 p.m. With regards to the provision of late night refreshment and the sale of alcohol, the applicant has applied for non-standard timings that include the terminal hour to be 1 a.m. for any private function. The premises currently benefit from a premises license that was granted back in March 2021 following a DPS variation. On the 27th of May, the applicant amended their application to remove proposed condition 27. Additionally, on the 30th of June, following correspondence received from Noise and Nuisance, the applicant agreed to add one extra condition to their license if granted. Following this agreement, Noise and Nuisance confirmed their withdrawal of their representation. Finally, the licensing section received 44 representations in total, one from Councillor Murphy, one from Queen Caroline Estate Tenants and Residents Association, one from Digby Mansions Residents Association, one from Hammersmith Mall Residents Association, 35 objecting to the license application, 3 supporting the application, and 2 with comment, neither supporting nor objecting the application to the application. Nothing further from licensing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Maria. Okay, I would now like to invite the residents speaking in.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just ask? I'm not clear. Are you saying that you don't want to hear my amendments to the application before the residents start? Because it seems to me they're going to be complaining about certain matters which are in the application, which we are prepared to concede. So wouldn't it be better for me to concede some matters now so that they don't have to deal with those issues? Otherwise, I'm just going to be sitting here twiddling my thumbs thinking, well, they're complaining about something we're not going to apply for.
I think I'd rather stick to the procedure that I have in place. You will have, Mr. Bailey, I've said, plenty of time to address the changes that you want to feedback to the objectors. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Okay, I would now like to invite, please, Ms. Shirley Cupid. Ms. Cupid, and as I said, you've got 3 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of Queen Caroline Estate TRA, and our estate is right next to Riverside Studios, so it's within yards of residents' homes. And also, just to tell you a bit about the estate, it's got a high proportion of families and older people. It's among the top 20 most deprived neighbourhoods in the borough. So our residents need you to protect them from further harm than they already experience in the current world. I love Riverside Studio, so actually it's quite painful to be here tonight, only 2 years after the last licence application. I'm not going to repeat everything I said in my submission because you have that, you've seen it, but I just want to stress how badly the licence would affect our residents if all the conditions that were applied for were granted. I don't think Riverside Studio should be able to reinvent itself as a drinking establishment and a party venue entirely separately from its arts mission. Please don't approve standalone alcohol sales or mobile bars or cocktail bars. All of these things would be devastating for our community. Opening till 1 AM for private parties. None of that fits with Riverside Studios' remit as a community arts venue. It really jars, and those kinds of activities have a huge impact on local residential areas. It would subject our residents to disturbance both during daytime but also into the night, and particularly we have a high proportion of children on the estate. They need their sleep if they're going to get the best out of school the next day, the same as their parents and other adults need their sleep. So it's really important that all activities should cease by 11 PM, and particularly no extension of any kind of drinking or refreshments after that hour. We're already blighted by the extreme drinking that is happening nowadays on the riverside. We have people urinating on the estate, and much worse all the time now, and we don't need anything that makes that worse. I'm sure Riverside Studios don't mean our residents harm, but they can't control their patrons once they leave the venue or curb the effects of excessive drinking. We all make a noise when we've had a nice night out. So that's why it's important that that noise should be kept to a reasonable hour. And I really believe it should be no later than 11 PM. I think the restrictions that this committee imposed 2 years ago were really reasonable compromise between our needs and the needs of Riverside Studios.
If you could please finish in
Okay, yeah, all I want to say is nothing has changed except for COVID. And I know they will make an argument that they need COVID recovery, but this is a new business plan. It's not just COVID recovery. And we've experienced COVID too. Our residents, more than most, have had the negative impact, and we need recovery from COVID time. We don't need new disruption and disturbance, public nuisance, harm to our children. Thank you. Sorry for.
Thank you very much. Okay. Can I please invite Ms. Jane Bain, please? Ms. Bain, you are muted, Ms. Bain.
Better?
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much.
Right. I represent the residents of Digby Mansions that live in the 2 blocks closest to the river. Digby Mansions is on the opposite side of Hammersmith Bridge Road to Riverside Studios. And at the moment, we are less severely impacted, obviously, because the pathway underneath the Riverwalk, underneath the bridge, is not open. But if and when that pathway reopens, then we will get a lot of the people coming to Riverside Studios streaming down and coming past our place. Now, already we suffer from a huge amount of noise in the evenings from the other pubs along the river. You know, every single closing time at weekends, and quite often at weekdays as well, if it's nice, you get this river of noise going up the street as people leave the pub. If Riverside Studios are granted a later license, and if they are granted conditions which enable them to become a drinking venue, not an arts venue, and I think that's an important distinction. Riverside Studios is an arts venue. It isn't a collection of bars and pubs. Then if they have a later license, then all that noise will simply happen either all over again later, or worse, all the other local pubs will say, oh, great, well, we can stay open to midnight as well. And then that moves all the noise till later in the evening. It's a very dangerous precedent. We fully support all the objections already mentioned by Shirley Cupid about the effects on the people of the Queen Caroline estate. And if and when that pathway underneath the bridge reopens, Digby would be subjected to the same sort of impacts. And broadly speaking, the Hammersmith Mall Residents Association, who Mike is chairman of, and he's unable to be here, had the same views. This is an arts venue and it should stay as an arts venue. And it shouldn't have licensing hours which are any different to any of the other premises in the area. And it should still be the case that alcohol is ancillary to their other activities. That's all. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, I would now like to invite Ms. Nicola Grant, please.
Oops, apologies. I actually didn't realize I was meant to be speaking. I just wanted to listen to what everyone was saying. But I live in Queen's Wharf in the Riverside Studios, and I sent in my objections, as I think most of the residents did. This doesn't comply with what the Riverside Studios planning consent. Their bar and catering was supposed to be ancillary. I'm worried about the extra noise that we will have. I object to their planning. Sorry, I'm not prepared. I really didn't realize I was meant to be speaking today. I think there's someone from the Queen's Wharf Residents Association who is probably better prepared than I am. But just to say, I object to the planning, what they're asking for, the licensing laws.
Thank you, Ms. Grant.
All right.
No problem, thank you. Okay, I would now like to invite Mary Stowe, please.
Okay. I've been asked by the chair of Chancellor's Wharf to speak on behalf of the 100 or so residents who are right next door to the Riverside Studios. I've lived there for over 25 years, and so I'm well acquainted with the Riverside Studios in its current form and its past form as well. And the first thing I have to say is that I can't believe that after a full licensing process only a couple of years ago, followed by a contentious reapplication, they're yet again applying for a special dispensation to stay open late in a really densely populated residential area. And we were told in a letter from Tony Lancaster, the licensee, that this was for wrap parties after television productions. And I just feel that this is a sleight of hand trying to, a commercial TV studio trying to get special favors by positioning itself as an arts centre. We live next door to the Riverside Studios, which is supposed to be an arts centre for the local community. Instead, we feel rather bullied by these repeated applications, which are going to have, you know, if granted, will have a serious impact on the residents of Chancellor's Wharf and many other residences nearby. It's a very densely populated area. I particularly would like to just express my concern about the idea of late night refreshment, this non-standard timing for booked functions until 1 a.m, the extension of alcohol consumption to 1 a.m, and also adding tables to the already narrow Thames path in front of the Riverside Studios. All these changes will inevitably create more disturbance late at night as people arrive and leave Riverside Studios. In Chancellor's Wharf, we're particularly concerned about the removal of condition 38, which is that customers and staff shall be prohibited from accessing the alleyway and using the restaurant alleyway exit entry after 2200 hours. This alleyway, Crisp Walk, the noise from Crisp Walk is extremely disturbing to residents of Chancellor's Wharf and many in Queen's Wharf. That's the reason why we have gained this condition on Sands Riverside to be open only until 10 p.m. The noise levels are shocking from there. So we believe that the Riverside Studios, as landlord for the entire ground floor of the Queen's Wharf building, should continue to be bound by this condition. So if there is a change in leaseholder, those safeguards remain. I'd also like to echo the words of Shirley and Jane in saying that I'm very disappointed that the Riverside Studios, which is supposed to make our lives better as a local community arts centre, is once again trying again to get special dispensations. It's an arts centre, not a drinking venue or a party venue.
So your time's up.
Okay, I will just ask for one thing, because I know that the lawyer is going to talk about some changes. I would say finally that the very latest that the Riverside Studio should be allowed to stay open and serve alcohol be 11 p.m. like everyone else in the area, or even 10 p.m. like Sam's. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I would now like to invite Anne Costain, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words tonight. And I should start by expressing my thanks to Maria Demetriou, the licensing officer, for her helpful clarification of many details, and to the councillors for their time this evening. I'm Anne-Marie Costain, a resident of Queen's Wharf and a member of the Queen's Wharf Residents Association Committee, which examined this application very carefully. And as we are the closest in the residential area to Riverside Studios, we are majorly impacted. Let me begin by saying that I'm extremely supportive of Riverside Studios. As a Hammersmith resident for more than 30 years, I've appreciated having a unique art centre on my doorstep, and the redevelopment of the Riverside Studios and integration into Queen's Wharf was a strong factor in deciding to move here. Now, coming on to the changes in their licence, on the face of it, the changes to their licence do not seem very different. The main one is the provision of late night refreshment indoors Monday to Sunday from until 2300 to midnight, and the non-standard timing where the terminal hours will be 1 o'clock. But this is a residential area. For events to continue until 1 a.m. in the morning will extend the hours of noise and the potential for rowdy behaviour in the immediate vicinity and dispersal issues in Queen Caroline Street. There are many children in both areas who need to get a good night's sleep before school. And if Riverside Studio needs a late night extension, the correct mechanism should be via a 10. Let me now come on to some of the conditions. Although the main changes seem minor, there are many more significant changes tucked away in the new conditions. We are particularly concerned about raising the number of outside seats in the hatched area of the plan from 68 to 75. At the moment, the existing tables are along the Riverside Studios areas of activity and not next to residents' doors. This expansion brings the tables round the curve of the building, bringing disturbance, further obstruction of the Thames path, and potential security issues. Those tables are far from their kitchen and main area, where their staff are based, in a blind spot, and the ability for their staff to supervise these tables is in doubt. I personally don't understand why they are not putting additional tables in the patio area by their cafe, and should be encouraged to do so. The temporary mobile bar, which is number 35, there is no information about where this will be and whether it's authorised by a pavement licence or under the Business and Planning Act. Sam already has one, and it's causing serious obstruction of the Thames path, with queuing and people sitting noisily on the wall for hours. It poses a hazard from conflict between cyclists and joggers with drinkers. At the
your time's nearly up, please.
Okay, I would then just like to mention all the conditions that were in the original application, which should be reimposed, which is number 44 and 48. And just to make a comment finally, that there are many existing conditions where the Riverside Studios has not complied, and their failure to do so does not inspire much confidence for the future. And those were listed in my original submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I would now like to invite Karen McDaniel, please.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm also a member of the Residents Association. A lot of the points I would make or have already been covered, so I'm going to cut straight to the chase, which is that I'm particularly concerned that, as Andy mentioned, a lot of the conditions that were imposed in the previous license application have continued to be flouted, and that's nothing to do with COVID. This has happened from the outset. And as a member of the association, I myself have emailed on several occasions to Riverside Studios and drawn their attention to these conditions. I've also had meetings along with Andy Costain with Mr. Lancaster, and Mr. Lancaster himself has had meetings with others where we have discussed the conditions that continue not to be met, regardless of COVID and regardless of the leniency that you have granted them because of COVID. So we feel very strongly that if they can't be trusted to fulfill the conditions, if they can't be trusted to fulfill the conditions that are already in place, they should not be trusted with new conditions, with a new license, which in fact does not align with their planning permission. And I personally feel very strongly about this. I think this will cause a lot of problems with health and safety, particularly if they have tables outside, all the way along the facade of the river, some potential tables on the other side of the river, of the walkway, and they're talking about 7 or 8 tables on the other side, which will mean waiters crossing an already busy and dangerous area. I'm very concerned also about the fire risk, because the safety doors are continually left open or ajar, and that is a fire risk to the residents. That's one of the conditions that I'm particularly concerned about, because that in turn brings cooking smells for the residents. This is something that has not been addressed either. I do feel very strongly that we should not have at any point vertical drinking, and that meals should be served at all times to all patrons outside. It's very, very difficult for the staff at the moment to serve customers safely because the tables are bolted to the floor. They are just on the edge of their demise, which means that the waiters have to stand outside the demise in order to serve. The barriers that you requested that they should place are not there. I can say that I have seen the barriers about 3 times in the entire 2.5 years. And these barriers are only 1 meter long. They don't cover the entire seating area, and they are outside the demise. The conditions stated previously that the waiters should serve inside the barriers, inside the demise. I understand that for COVID, they are entitled to serve 1 meter outside their demise. But my point is they have not followed these conditions from the get-go. I also...
Your time's nearly up.
Yes. I would like to say that we are, as residents, very happy and willing to support Riverside Studios, but I think our patience has been worn thin. And that is why you have had no complaints, because we have been willing to support. But it's now come to the end. We've had enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for raising new points. I would welcome if the objectives that will be invited to speak in the next minutes. If you've got points that have already been raised by previous objectives, we would appreciate if you can focus on any new points. Thank you. And not repeat what has already been raised, please. I would now like to invite Mr. Fred Johnson, please. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I am a Chancellor's Wharf resident. A lot of what's already been said I have included in my submission around the noise, around the possible disturbance. The two things I would emphasize are that in the terms of the Riverside Studios' original remit for being there, alcohol and catering were ancillary to entertainment, not let's have a bar outside and serve anyone who happens to be walking past. The other issue I have is the removal of conditions 38, 39 and 40. As someone who lives at the front of Chancellor's Wharf and has the alleyway next to us, their argument that because it was there for Sam's restaurant doesn't apply to them because they would not use it is sufficient for now this minute. But should they as landlord get rid of Sam's restaurant and take over that area themselves, they would have access to that exit. So I am strongly in favour of those being retained in the original licensing agreement. And as for their solicitor now coming up with changes at the last minute in the hope it will placate us, that doesn't work, because with all of these things you have to have time to actually reflect and look at what's actually being proposed. So if he has got changes, then I suggest we ignore them, because as far as I'm concerned, what they're asking for is not a good way forward, and I think the whole thing should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. I would now like to invite Mr. Peter Lovell, please.
I didn't know I was going to talk.
So did you make it up on the Who?
Well, I have my...
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mr. Lovell.
Thank you. I don't really have much to add to the comments that have already been made. I concur with all the people who've suggested that the previous licensing conditions should be reviewed, and I think that the license, the alcohol license, should be in line with those of the other local premises like Sam's and the other pubs along the river. I don't think they should be allowed to have a license that goes out till later, because I fear that people will then move from those pubs to the riverside for late night drinking. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lovell. I also have Mr. Philip McDonnell, please.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak. Most of what I've said has already been said, but just very quickly. I've worked in the film and television industry most of my life. What is being requested is completely unnecessary. I'm sorry to have to say that. I've been a customer of Riverside Studios, the Royal Riverside Studios, and a supporter of that. So I'm very saddened to see what they're trying to do. They're turning their business into something completely different and not what's intended. I just wanted to make a sort of technical comment on paragraph 4.1 under the other information. It states that there have not been any warnings, simple cautions or prosecutions given in respect to the premises during the past 3 years. I'm sure that's correct. However, as you've heard, there have been many significant breaches that could possibly have led to this had the residents filed complaints to Hammersmith and Fulham. Clearly we have to do this. We've complained to Riverside Studios, but the management have brushed aside these complaints, saying that these activities are allowed under COVID rules. But following investigation, we now know this is not correct, which is very upsetting. Moving on to the current application, we already know what the effect of some of the proposed license changes will be, as the Riverside Studios have already been serving the public with alcohol way beyond the current 8:30 deadline, without food and beyond the demise. We've even seen them serving drinks to people standing as far away as the river wall after 10 p.m, with large crowds gathering. This is a breach of at least 4 regulations: serving after 8:30, not removing tables and chairs by 9 p.m, and alcohol not served with food and serving beyond the seating area. I mean, my family and I live immediately above the outside seating area on the first floor, as does the Atherton family, who've asked me to represent them as well. The Riverside Studios, very sadly, have shown no consideration for the local residents and have blatantly ignored the regulations. I mean, I question whether the license holder can be regarded as fit and proper to hold a license at all, unless they can demonstrate that they can abide by the rules of the present license. I hope that you'll reject the application, but more importantly, investigate the recent breaches and monitor their behavior in future. Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonnell. Okay, I think I've invited all the objectors here this evening to speak. Therefore, I would like to invite Councillor P.J. Murphy, Ward Councillor. I'm going to give you as a Ward Councillor 5 minutes, unless our legal officer has got any thoughts.
It's to your discretion, Chair, I would say.
So I hope 5 minutes is enough for you, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Councillor. I certainly hope it will be, because I don't want to repeat what's already in my written submission. I think it's really important for the committee, and it has been said, that this application is similar to the one that was requested in 2019 and was refused. And nothing has changed in relation to the objections then and the situation now. So just going on precedent, if we refused it in 2019, it should be refused now. And residents in this committee, the licensing committee, worked extremely hard to accommodate Riverside Studios, and the outcome was balanced, wasn't it? It allowed for the complex to do what it was set up to do, which is to show films, have shows, have exhibitions, and record TV shows, and let the residents sleep well. And it's obvious, you've heard tonight, how Riverside Studios is not fulfilling its current obligations. And people simply don't trust it to run what will effectively become a late night bar. We need to remember that when Riverside Studios applied for a license back in 2019, they said they were going to open up a high-end restaurant. And if you look at pages 48 and 49 of the report, the licensing conditions are peppered with references to a restaurant, not a bar, not a pub, not a cocktail bar, but to a restaurant. Now, what we have now is a bar selling alcohol and some limited bar snacks. I think Riverside Studios was duplicitous at the time and had no real intention of opening a restaurant, and their significant concern they simply can't be trusted. People have already said where the original conditions aren't being adhered to. Alcohol is being served without food, bar service has been available, courting residents meetings don't take place, unlike the proactive approach of Sam's just next door. A plate of olives appears to be now a substantial meal. Trained doormen appear to be invisible, and there's no no demarcation between the public highway and the outside seating areas. At the 2019 meeting, Riverside Studios said it would provide a roped-off area as a demarcation, and indeed it did a few times. Then it disappeared, and we have waitresses and waiters straying onto the public highway with alcohol and food. In response to my recent inquiries, the solicitors of Riverside Studios informed officers that they now believe the cobblestones outside the studios can be seen as a demarcation. Well, that sounds like a load of cobblestones to me. And I'd ask that condition 48 is changed to be more specific and say that outside seating areas shall be separated from the public highway by a screen or a rope barrier as a means of demarcation from the public highway whilst licensing activities are taking place. And this will aid enforcement. I think one of the big changes, or two big changes since the original application, is Hammersmith Broadway now has the highest street crime in Hammersmith and Fulham. And we're seeing a significant increase in crime, antisocial behaviour on the waterfront. If we allow the increased hours and the ability to sell alcohol without the need for substantial food, we are going to see a migration of street drinkers. We're going to see a migration of people from pubs that close, and we're going to see an increase in crime and antisocial behaviour. I don't think the committee should be extending any drinking licenses in the ward with the highest crime rate in Hammersmith and Fulham. The other thing that's happened is COVID-19, and that's had a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable in our society, and our children's education has been severely affected. To allow late night revelry will make us complicit in disturbing children's sleep and their rest time. I'd like the committee to look at that very closely in my letter. The other thing that is different now is there's a proposal come from a ferry pier to open to provide a ferry service across the Thames to Barnes. TfL expect 1,000 passengers plus during peak times. So I ask you just to imagine what that's going to be like, 1,000 passengers an hour going past Riverside Studios, which is already an overstretched pinch point. And with outside drinking permitted or being a bar there, accidents are just waiting to happen. I'd like to finally turn, just before I finish, to the late-minute changes that have been brought about or have been proposed by the solicitor, and just how disappointed, I guess is the best way of putting it, I feel by this. When the original license came out, it was very difficult, application came out, it's very difficult for people to understand what it meant and to put in their objections. And I asked that the time be extended. Riverside Studios solicitors were asked to do that, and we were told no. And now no, because it was expensive and they put a lot of work into it. And suddenly now, at the last minute, their solicitor has spoken to the applicant and they've come forward with some changes. It seems just a little bit rum, doesn't it? That suddenly at the last minute stuff can be done, and they won't, as one of the previous speakers said, allow for full-term consultation. My request is that all of these are stopped. All of the original conditions are put back in. And the one area I think where we can agree is that there's no objections to take for patrons taking alcohol into films and shows, as long as they stick to the current licensing hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murphy. Okay, I would now like to invite the applicant and the applicant solicitor, please. Mr. Craig Bayliss and also Mr. Tony Lancaster. If you please bear with me a second, I'm just looking at my watch, and you have up to 32 minutes, which is the equivalent of the time that the objectors have used altogether for your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first of all just check that you can hear me okay? Thanks very much. I want to start off by saying how disappointed I am, first of all, with Councillor Murphy's final comments about the way in which this application has been conducted. It's been conducted within the regulations and within the spirit and the letter of the Licensing Act. And there's no reason for my clients to have wanted to withdraw an application and start it all over again, when unfortunately the details of the application were not available on the council website. That's not our fault, and there's no reason why my client should be prejudiced by it. Let me start off, please, by amending this application in a number of areas. One of the reasons I want to do this is because, having seen and engaged with the residents over the consultation period, my clients have taken the view that it's right that they should pull back on some of the areas that were of concern to the residents. So, Chair, can I take you first of all, please, to page 39 of the report, so I can take you through some of the proposed conditions. Let me know, Chair, when you're with me.
I am on page 39. Have other colleagues of the committee? Are you on page 39? Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Chair, that should be, I think it's page 2 of a series of conditions that we put forward for this new licence application. Chair, condition 26 reads, the number of persons seated in all external areas shall be limited to 75. The old licence, which is currently in force, specifies a maximum total of 68, and we're happy to stay with that number. I think one of the objectors who spoke originally said they were concerned about the increase in numbers, an increase of 7 people outside from 68 to 75. I'm happy that it should remain as 68 people outside. So, Chair, if you want to amend condition 26 so that it reads 68 instead of 75, that's fine. Chair, condition 32 in relation to the external seating. I want to give the committee an alternative. Really, the way I frame that condition currently is that the external seating area should be cleared of patrons, tables and chairs by 2200, as is the case currently with Sam's. Sam's has a 2200 our external terrace area. I wanted to add the wording or rendered unusable. The reason for that, Chair, is that some of the tables are actually bolted down to the floor. And the reason that we've bolted them down to the floor is because some residents were actually complaining about the noise from the tables being taken in at closing time. So I want to give the committee the alternative of either clearing them of patrons by 2200 or rendering them unusable. Whatever you think is the most appropriate, Chair, I'm happy to live with that. Chair, condition on page 40, condition 35. There have been concerns expressed about a mobile bar outside. I'll get rid of that, Chair. I'll lose condition 35 completely. As you're aware, under the Business and Planning Act, we're entitled to make off sales to people outside, so we can do that from inside and they can drink outside if they want to anyway without the need for this licence. Condition 36 is a contentious condition in relation to private pre-book functions and extension to 1 AM. I'll lose that condition completely, Chair. Chair, that means there is no extension to any of the hours of operation at the moment now for the premises whatsoever. What I also ought to do, Chair, is add in the old condition 48 from the previous licence, which was the condition which said that the outside seating area shall be separated from the public highway by a screen, rope barrier or other means of demarcation. My instructions are that we do have 10 SATA barriers outside and they are regularly used, contrary to Councillor Murphy's observations. And so I'm happy that the old condition 48 be put back into this application if you're minded to grant it. In relation to the application in respect of removal of food and alcohol being ancillary to food, Chair, I want to offer a condition which says that there shall be no vertical drinking in the cafe bar area and all patrons to be seated and served by table service. And the capacity in the ground floor restaurant bar be limited to 100 covers, which is the current capacity of the premises. So, Chair, those are the amendments to the application, which effectively means there is no increase in capacity to the premises. There is no increase in any licensable activity hours at the premises. We already have a license until midnight for recorded music and everything else. We're adding in late night refreshment because, and this may be a legal quirk that the residents don't understand, but you require legal late night refreshment if you're serving hot food or hot drink to people. It's got nothing to do with alcohol at all. So if people are sitting in the cafe bar area and they want a coffee after 11 o'clock, we need a late night refreshment license to do that. That's the only reason that we've applied for late night refreshment. So late night refreshment till midnight, which still doesn't exceed the hours we are already permitted under the existing license, which are midnight for regulated entertainment. Chair, the main reason for making the application for a new license is because the previous license was not fit for purpose. There were a number of conditions on the previous license which were unenforceable and in particular unlawful. And I want to refer specifically to the old condition 38, which has been raised by a number of local residents, which says, customers and staff shall be prohibited from accessing the alleyway and using the restaurant alleyway exit after 2200. That's a reference to an alleyway next to Sam's called Crisp Walk. It is a public highway. We are not allowed by law to prohibit people from using a public highway. That is an unenforceable and unlawful condition. We can discourage patrons from using that area, but we cannot prohibit them from using that area because it is a public highway. That's one of the many conditions that were on the license that rendered it previously unusable. And it was my advice to the clients that they should seek a license which sets out conditions which are appropriate, proportionate, enforceable, and lawful. And the vast majority of the conditions which were on the previous license, we have retained. So just to recapture, there is no increase in hours sought by this license following the amendments we've made. There is no extra activity beyond the existing licensing hours that we've applied for. The Business and Planning Act allows for the sale and consumption of alcohol off the premises on the Riverwalk, which appears to be a problem for some residents, but unfortunately, it's already law, and therefore we're entitled to do it whether this license is granted or not. And so what we're trying to do is make this license enforceable, usable, and have the least impact possible on local residents. There is no increase in capacity because I've offered you a capacity condition for the ground floor bar and restaurant area. The main reason for applying to remove the ancillary food condition is the reason that you as committee will have heard time and time again from licensing solicitors like me. If I go with my wife or my kids, who are both over 18, by the way, I know I don't look it, but they are both over 18. If I go with my wife and kids into the bar at these premises and I want to have a meal and they just want to have a glass of wine, they can't. Because if you go as a mixed group, it means that the current condition provides that you can only have alcohol if you have a full table meal. All we are seeking is flexibility in the way that we conduct those premises. Not an increase in hours, not an increase in capacity, simply an increase in flexibility. I'm sorry, I don't know why Karen's come onto the meeting and shaking her head. There is no increase in hours, there is no increase in capacity. It is simply a change in the way that the area is used. The food will still be available at all times. The kitchen will still be available at all times. The alternative reason why we need to get rid of that condition is because the current license does not allow people who are attending the cinema or any of the other theatre areas to use, to go and have a drink without food. So at the moment, if they go to the cinema and have a glass of wine or half a pint of beer or a bottle of beer before they go into the cinema, they're in breach of the license, because the license currently requires they can only have alcohol as part of a table meal. So if I've bought a ticket to the cinema, I can't have a glass of wine and then go in and watch the film. Crazy. So this is the reason why we're seeking more flexibility. There has been some concern expressed. I'm trying to deal with all of the issues, Chair, that the residents have raised, but I'm happy to deal with more when you come to questions. There seems to be some concern that we're trying to turn the venue into an all-night drinking establishment, a Wetherspoons with vertical drinking and making all our money from those premises. The food and beverage income from these premises is 24% of the total income. We have an Arts Council grant. We have grants from other public authorities. If they thought that we were turning this into a boozer, those grants would stop. The primary purpose and function of these premises is as a cultural entertainment centre. If you want a condition on the licence, and this is a condition which I've offered in many other local authorities, where the provision of alcohol is ancillary to the use of the premises as an entertainment or cultural centre, I'm happy to offer that as a condition. And so food and beverage at these premises is always ancillary to the primary use of the premises as a cultural and entertainment centre. The premises is operated as a charity. It needs to make money whenever it can, because it doesn't always get grants from local authorities. It doesn't always get grants from Arts Council. It needs to make money from food and beverage, and it's a very, very useful source of income. They are not a troublesome venue. They are not a troublesome operator. I'm going to emphasise again, and I don't apologise for repeating this, we are not seeking an increase in hours. We are not seeking an increase in the type of entertainment that we provide. It is simply a change in the way that the entertainment is provided. Chair, I think that's all I need to say at the moment, but I'm happy to take questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bailey, for your representation. Okay, I would now like to invite members of the committee, please, to ask questions of any party about the application and issues that have been raised at the hearing. Who would like to make a start, please? Councillor Thorley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question to start for licensing. And I appreciate quite a lot of information was put forward by the applicant. But just turning to their proposed amendments, is it your understanding that the licensable hours are not being changed as a result of this application, and that the same thing in terms of capacity? Is that your understanding as to the proposed amendments?
Maybe my colleague Christina might be able to confirm, but
Councillor Thorley, if I can just help you on that point. The current licence, the old licence that I'm referring to, doesn't have a capacity limit for the ground floor bar area. So I'm offering you a capacity limit for the first time. It's based on our current capacity. So we have 100 covers in there. So I'm offering you that as a capacity for the premises. But I can confirm, and hopefully Christina can confirm this also, there is no increase in the hours for licensable activity.
I can confirm that, Councillor Thorley. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Bailey, if I may come to you next. Look, thank you for offering the amended conditions. That I am going to say, for the record, it's not very helpful when it comes to this late in the day. I appreciate it would have been helpful to put them at the start, but nonetheless, it's not easy. Residents have taken a lot of time to write submissions. Other parties have made representation. With great respect, I've filed for 158 pages. You know, it isn't very helpful, and it just would strike me that it would be a lot better if we had engaged in an earlier moment. But putting that to one side, we're dealing with what's in front of us right now. I think that the thing that is really troubling me is, you know, when this application was last dealt with in 2019, a lot of these representations were made, and we spent an awful lot of time trying to get the balance right. And as a result, the number of conditions were put on, you may say they are imperfectly worded and so on. But what troubles me is, whilst there is no, if you will, legal evidence of non-compliance, there is a lot of residents saying that they are witnessing non-compliance. And I'm incredibly nervous about granting variations when the existing condition may not be adhered to. So could you just explain to me really, if you are of the opinion that you are adhering to things, because it would seem to me that at the moment that's not the case.
Councillor Thorley, I understand completely. So the first thing I have to say is we refute allegations that we are not in compliance. Absolutely. There's been some suggestions that we haven't put rope barriers outside. The reason we haven't put rope barriers outside is because we've been closed for COVID. I can tell you that we were entirely closed between the 23rd of March and the 5th of August 2020. We were entirely closed between December 20 and April 21. Clearly, there's no need to put a rope barrier outside if you're not operating. So when there's no licensable activity going on, there is no licensable activity going on. We refute any allegation completely that we are not compliant. One of the objectors, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, referred to sales of alcohol for consumption by people outside. That's permitted under the Business and Planning Act. I understand that residents don't understand this, and there are legal difficulties for them in terms of the way in which legislation is dealt with. But the Business and Planning Act has made it perfectly lawful for unlicensed premises to sell alcohol for consumption outside without the need for any sort of license permission. So there may be perceived transgressions, but as far as I'm concerned, we refuse completely any suggestion that there have been breaches of conditions. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for that response. And just something, I think there's two things that have really fundamentally changed since the last time we assessed this application, which was made reference to by Councillor Murphy. One is, very unfortunately, this part of Hammersmith and Fulham has suffered, particularly in the last couple of years, with a very high crime rate. And secondly, there is obviously the potential for a peer to add, which obviously is like to generate higher footfall and so on. Given the way the studios are laid out, given how you have access outside, have you put any thought into what potentially additional measures you might need to take? As I say, it does seem the conditions, I know you're saying they're adhered to, but there is a bit of, you've got to hear both sides of the argument. So
I understand completely, yeah. What can I say? One of the existing conditions on the old licence is that there shall be a minimum of 2 SIA door staff to patrol the outside area. The clients asked me today, could we reduce that to 1? I said, no, that's a completely inappropriate response to the concerns of the residents. What you've got to do is make sure that the residents understand what you're trying to do and get on board with the residents and work with them. And so to that extent, my advice to them has been very clear that they've got to suck it up really and make sure that they are compliant and that they are going to remain compliant and deal with the issues as and when they arise. Let's face it, in the real world, this isn't a Wetherspoons. This isn't a pub where people come just to drink. To be honest, our prices are too high and people aren't going to go and do that. They've got the Chancellors around the corner. There are a plethora of pubs on Fulham Palace Road and around by the Apollo and up by the High Street. I live down at Parsons Green. I know the area very well. So people are not coming to the Riverside to drink and get drunk. It's a nice venue, looks out onto the river. It's a lovely place to come and have a glass of wine and something to eat if you want to, but it is not the place where people are coming for a late night drink and to get drunk. And I think you've got to look at the application in the context of what it is and on its own merits.
No, I thank you for that answer. So I do appreciate you're not now seeking to amend the hours. Something I did pick up on was the use of tents, and you're obviously relatively limited in the use of tents, albeit, I do accept for a large amount of the periods that the licence was granted, you have been closed.
Yeah.
I do understand the concerns about the perception of style drift and so on. I have heard your answer in relation to funding and so on. But with talk of this pop-up bar and so on, I do have a degree of sympathy with where residents are coming from. Could you explain to me, would it be the intention going forward, now you put forward these amended hours, would you be looking to use tents more proactively? Do you think the number of tents will remain the same? What really is the intention here going forward? Because it is that incredibly delicate balance between the area you operate in, which is now even more residential in nature than
I understand that, and can I say we understand the residents' concerns. I mean, there's been suggestions that we haven't held. There's a requirement in the current license for us to hold quarterly meetings. I've repeated that in the existing application. We're very happy to have quarterly meetings. The reason we haven't held quarterly meetings is because we haven't been open. So what's the point in having a meeting when you've got nothing to talk about? In terms of TENS and in terms of the application that we made originally for a 1 AM license for private pre-book functions, is again, it's a wish by the Riverside Studios to try and generate some income, because they do have what are called, I think, in the industry, wrap parties. So people come and do filming at the Riverside Studios. They want to have a drink after that. They wanted the potential is to use TENS for that. I said, why not just have a condition on the license which allows you to remain open later for wrap parties, just for private pre-book functions? That has produced a lot of adverse reaction from local residents. We've dropped the proposal. There are other ways to deal with that. We can use it by way of TENS. We can sell alcohol to them beforehand. They can bring their own alcohol if they want to do a wrap party. We will still make the premises available to them. There are just other ways of dealing with it. And so, again, what I'm trying to emphasize to the committee is that we want to be seen to be reasonable in this application by getting a bit more flexibility for the public areas, the restaurant bar areas during normal hours, but not seek to extend the hours to any late extent, because we understand how that impacts on residents and the concerns of residents. And we don't want to be on the end of a review application in 12 months' time.
Yeah, I know what we're doing. But just on the quarterly meetings, I think this is quite an important point, is, and I appreciate there's a different application, so, but we obviously had SAMS before us reasonably recently. And I think one of the big differences between this application and that application was we had an equally large number of residents speaking on the application, but it was split, I would argue, 50-50 between those supporting the applicant and those opposing the application. In this situation, I think we only have 3 representations in support. And I think one of the reasons for that was the level of communication from SANS was perceived to be so much better. And yet it would strike me, okay, yes, I get you shut. But if you're about to put in a variation of this nature, which I think even you would accept perhaps could have been communicated better, it would strike me as very, very sensible to have these quarterly meetings. I'm just wondering why you felt there wasn't the need.
That's a difficult one. I can only give you the answer that the clients gave me, which was, if we're not open, what's the need for the meetings during the COVID period? I've got a list of we had 2 meetings in 2020 during the COVID period, one in January and one in August. We had another 4, 5, 6 meetings in January, February, March 2020 before COVID hit. We sent an email to residents on the 30th of April 2021 inviting them to deal with this proposal and engage with this proposal. And I think one of the difficulties has been a huge misunderstanding on the part, and I don't say this with any malice, there's a huge misunderstanding. In fact, I say it quite smugly as a licensing lawyer. I know what the licensing law is, the residents don't. So to a certain extent, they're unfortunately bound by those difficulties, and it's unfortunate, and I accept that. So issues, for example, with the Business and Planning Act, which have given a lot more latitude to businesses in terms of off sales, etc., have probably gone over the residents' heads because they haven't understood how that works. Be that as it may, you're probably right. There probably could have been better engagement. There has been engagement in the past when, to be frank, there have been a lot of irrelevant issues raised, like, can you change your menu because we don't like the smell of fish coming up from your kitchen? There's a lot of stuff that's extraneous to this application, which would have made things more difficult in terms of communication. But I accept, Councillor Thorley, you're probably right. We probably could have managed that better. However, we are where we are.
Look, as you will know, the site has a long, complicated history covering many aspects.
Yeah.
But it does mean that people are quite understandably very, very sensitive.
I get it completely.
Councillor Thorley.
Sorry, I only have one more point and then I was done.
Okay.
And then I'm having a good ground now.
Okay, thank you. Because I know objectives have been making comments in the chat function, and I do not want to leave some unanswered questions that objectives are raising following some of the amendments that you have proposed. Like Councillor Thorley, I feel these amendments should have been proposed earlier and consulted as well and discussed with the objectors. Clearly, it's a contentious application, and the residents who live close by are impacted by the way the premises are running at the moment, and with the current license. So I think further conversations and ongoing and regular communication is important to address the concerns of the residents that are being impacted and suffer the most, and know from their lived experience of the challenges that they're facing at the moment. Just wanted to say that, but I want to please invite Councillor Murphy. We've had an opportunity to listen to some of the amendments that have been suggested by Mr. Bailey. And I know you've corresponded with objectives in the chat. What are your thoughts on the amendment that are being proposed as well, and some of the pending concerns that objectives are raising?
Well, I'm a bit confused, to be honest, because I haven't really sunk them in, because as Mr. Bailey so aptly points out, that I'm not a smug licensing lawyer. I'm just a mere human being. I struggle with one of the questions we have here is that the licensing hours for outside, it says the old license states that servicing should only be until 8:30. Is this being retained, or is this being changed? It says that it's not it's not currently adhered to. There's a degree of, sorry, the old clause 46 says licensed activity should stop outside at 2030. I don't see that, says one person, in the new application. I found it frankly insulting to be told that my own eyes are deceiving me and the own service I've had is in irrelevance, and that the applicants have assured Mr. Bayliss that everything is compliant, and it's not. And I find that whole attitude there and this whole non-engagement with people, this refusal to accept or listen to other people's counter views, is something that has really affected the residents, and it's broken down trust completely. And you were, one of the comparisons Mr. Bayliss makes there is he was comparing himself to Sam's. Sam's is a restaurant. It's not a cultural centre. You shouldn't be comparing yourself to that. There's a real concern. So I think I probably just stated it. One of our people here says that they have photographic evidence of non-compliance, and I am just kind of thrown on the back foot, quite frankly, by what I've heard and by what is being proposed. I mean, my preference. So we have no objection to people taking alcohol into the cinemas, but I think the statement that we're only trying to change this so that I can have dinner and my children can have nuts or not eat is the only reason we're doing it. I just think that's completely disingenuous. I think we've got a thing there that says you can only drink alcohol if you have a substantial meal. That's got to be enforced. It's got to be enforced within the current hours, and the only exception to that should be the ability to take their alcohol into a film or a show. And I think that's really all I can add, because I'm still processing a lot of what this means, and it's insulting that it should come so late in when we're all obviously not licensing experts, as Mr. Bayliss has very accurately pointed out to us.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murphy. I know from the chat as well that some objectors are asking to come in to ask some questions, and I see Miss Mary Stowe, she's got her hand up. If other people want to make any comment or question, can I please suggest that you put your hand up so that I can see you? Miss Stowe, please.
Yes, I'd just like to, yes, I'm like Councillor Murphy and many others, I'm completely thrown by this last minute amendment. And yes, I'm not a hotshot licensing lawyer with particular expertise in obtaining late licenses, I see from their website. I would just specifically, though, like to talk about something where I think I do know more about this license than Mr. Bayliss, and that is condition 38, where he talks about this being to do with a public highway. He might be a licensing lawyer, but it's about the door, and there is a difference between a door and a public highway. And we would ask very strongly that that condition remain in, please. It's about the door being open, not about the public highway. And I have to say one other thing, which is that he talks about the Riverside Studios not being a troublesome operator. Well, I have to say on this evening's performance, I would say that they have proved that they are exactly that. I mean, coming in at the last minute with huge changes to an already complex document is insulting to us. He does not understand residents' problems, complaints. He says he does not. Thank you.
Chair, can I just comment on that? Because every amendment that we've made this evening has been a concession to residents. a concession. The residents have won 4 concessions from us in relation to this licence application. In relation to condition 38 that Mary was talking about, the wording of that condition says, customers and staff shall be prohibited from accessing the alleyway and using the exit entry after 2200. You cannot lawfully prohibit people from accessing a public highway. It is unlawful to do so, and it's an unenforceable condition.
I'm sorry, but you can insist that they don't use a particular door. And I think a thing that I've discovered throughout this meeting is that Mr. Bailey seems to want to interpret things in a way that they aren't actually being put in or interpreted. So, for example, on section 48, I've said that I want the wording to be absolutely clear that it either has to be a rope boundary or another form of barrier. He's not conceded that at all.
I'm happy to accept that condition 48 in the new licence.
Thank you. What a shame it wasn't done before, Mr. Bayless.
I did say it before.
No, you didn't,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Bayless.
much.
You said you wanted the
you.
original wording back. Please don't
Thank
be
you, Councillor
disingenuous.
Murphy. Thank you. I've got another here of people that want to speak and they've raised their hand. I now would like to invite Ms. Anne Costain, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much. I've just got 4 very quick questions, which I hope they can answer.
Can you please ask the questions through me, please? I mean, we've got a procedure in place, so no questions are directly asked to the applicant, but through me, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Somewhere slipped into this application is mention that they want to use their Riverside room as a cocktail bar. Now, this room actually is on the front of the building, very close to the residence entrance of one block of Queen's Wharf. And we understand, but there's been no information, that the access to it will be from the riverside and that door will remain open. We also understand that there will be no seating inside, so that people will be taking their drinks out onto the Thames path and drinking there. Now, I would maintain that that's totally unacceptable. The second point is, whilst we welcome them giving us this concession that the 75 exterior seats will be reduced to 68, could we ask through you, Chair, for them to clarify that they will not be spreading out these tables further along the walkway for the reasons I set out earlier, that they will not be able to supervise and manage those because they are so far from their centre of operation. My third point is, I understood from Maria, and I would like this clarified, please, that does this new application nullify and cancel out their old licence? Because what I was told was they can have 2 licenses running in parallel. Now that's a complete nonsense, and we as residents will have no idea what we can protest about, what can be enforced. So I would like clarification of that. And the final point is that having given all these concessions, why was this a full application and not a variation? I mean, Sam's had a license variation, and I just don't understand why there is this difference of approaches between their premises and Riverside actually going for a full new premises license. Thank you.
Thank you
Do you want me to deal with those?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Mr. Bailey, go ahead.
Okay. First point, cocktail bar in the Riverside room. The Business and Planning Act allows that to happen without the need for any extension of the licence at all. It's part of the current legislation. So it doesn't form part of this application. I don't know where Ms. Costain's got that from, but we're perfectly entitled to use the Riverside room for off-sale purposes under the Business and Planning Act. Second point was in relation to the tables and chairs outside. We have a pavement licence granted by the council, and we use the tables and chairs within the demise granted to us by the council for the pavement licence. Third point that she's raised in relation to the old licence, if you are minded to grant this licence, I will surrender the old licence. That was the whole reason for making this new application, because my advice to the clients, and they used other licensing systems previously, my advice to the clients was the previous licence was not fit for purpose because of the unenforceable and unlawful conditions on it. And so we make a fresh application and start again. So if you're minded to grant this application, we will surrender the old licence. And I think that answers the fourth point as well.
Thank you, Ms. Costain. Before we move on to the next objector who has their hand raised, I would like to ask Councillor Smith if you have any questions or comments about any of the points that have been raised and discussed so far.
Thanks, Chair. There's been a lot of discussion, but I think amongst the toing and froing, and I did have a licence question which has now come up. I think I am fine for now, but I'm still mulling over various notes I've made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I had written down that Mr. Fred Johnson wanted to ask a question. I don't know, his hand is no longer up. Okay, I'm going to.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Johnson.
I was going to raise the issue over clause 38, which, as we understand it, and as we understood it, and as we have gone through a planning case with Sam's restaurant, is all not about the use of the alleyway, it's about the use of the door into the alleyway, because yes, anyone can use the alleyway, but if you are actively sending people through that door into the alleyway after 10 o'clock, it does cause a lot of noise and etc. through the alleyway. But the other point, I don't, and this is probably a technical point and is probably in the various legal things, but if there is to be no vertical drinking, how can you do off sales? Because does that mean people have to come in, sit down, be served, and then walk out? I'd like clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Bailey, it's the opportunity to address the concerns that have been raised.
Deal with those points, Chair. Can I come back to this very vexed question again about the old condition 38 and the use of crisp walk? You will get legal advice from your legal advisor when you retire to consider this point, so I don't need to carry on with the point. Public highway is public highway. You can't prevent access to it. The other point to make in relation to this condition is it's actually a doorway from Sam's. It's got nothing to do with our premises at all. And to be frank, I'm not sure how a license condition on our license can be enforceable in respect of Sam's premises. It's really not an enforceable condition as far as we're concerned. In relation to the gentleman's other point, that was off sales, wasn't it? Well, again, you'll be guided by your legal advisor when you retire, but you can walk in and walk out to make an off sale. The sale of alcohol is controlled in relation to the sale rather than consumption. So consumption can be wherever it likes. So if it's an off sale, you go inside, you walk out with it, and you drink it outside.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I would now like to invite Shirley, please. Ms. Shirley Cupid.
Thank you, Chair. I have put some of what I'm about to say in the chat, but I want to say it anyway. The repeated reference to Wetherspoons and contrasting that with the kind of clientele that would drink at Riverside Studios, it seems to infer that somehow middle-class drinkers don't make a noise when they're drunk or when they've drunk alcohol in a way that working-class people do. And I actually find that ludicrous. I find it offensive as somebody who represents a very large working-class community in the area. People who are drinking or have been drinking make noise. We all do. So the idea that somehow the drinkers who would come to this establishment wouldn't do that just doesn't hold water. The suggested amendments still allow Riverside Studios to reinvent itself as an independent drinking establishment, and people will go there to do that because, as they've pointed out, it's a very nice place to go and sit and drink or stand and drink or whatever. Also, we haven't won anything. We shouldn't be here. So the idea that we've had concessions and that we've won something, again, I find that really insulting because we have all put so much time into this 2 years ago, and we're doing it again now when we shouldn't even have to. It's fine to amend the license so people can have a drink in intervals of plays or take a drink into the cinema. I think we've all said that in our submissions or whatever. That's not the issue. But separating the provision of alcohol from using this arts venue as a patron of an arts venue or a restaurant, I think is just what is absolutely not okay, and what will increase the antisocial behaviour in the area, increase just the sheer volume of people going to drinking establishments in the area. So again, I'm asking you, and my last point really is, Mr. Bayliss keeps talking about what's allowed under the current legislation. To me, allowed doesn't mean you have to. Be a good neighbour, please, Riverside Studios. Just because you're allowed to, don't take advantage of the whole COVID situation to do things that are not neighbourly in a densely residential area and will have a negative impact on our residents and the residents that are here tonight from Rivers, who live around Riverside Studios. Don't blight our lives with making them so much worse than they have to be. We love Riverside Studios as an arts venue, but please not as a drinking establishment. I'm sorry, I've gone on too long, but I'm actually quite vexated by now with some of what we've heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kubert. Mr. Bayliss, have you got any comments in relation to Ms. Kubert's concerns?
I wasn't sure that there was anything really that Shirley said.
No problem.
If you want me to, Chair.
No, it's fine. I mean, afterwards you will have more opportunity. I would like to invite Ms. Karen McDonald. I know Karen asked in the chat if she could have an opportunity to comment.
Yes, Councillor, thank you. I'm just very confused here because the current licence allows for bar and catering services outside until 8:30 to be cleared away by 9 p.m. So I don't agree that there is no extension to the hours to 11 p.m. when currently the restriction is until 8:30, cleared away by 9 p.m. That's one point. The second point is about the tables that Mr. Bayliss referred to being bolted. The issue is not that they are bolted to the floor. The issue is that they are too big, and deliberately too big, because the bolt is actually on the edge of the cobble, which makes it impossible for service to take place within the demise, especially once they start complying with putting the barriers, which they now say they will. And by the way, the barriers have never been in place other than a few times, and there is only one barrier that is 1 meter long. Thank you very much. I would really like to know also, when you refer to the concession that you have made, that there will be no vertical drinking in the cafe bar area, I would like confirmation that that will include the outside area as well. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm happy to confirm that, Chair. No vertical drinking outside.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Okay, can I invite Mr. Philip McDonald, please?
Yes, hello. I'm intrigued that he's saying no vertical drinking outside when he sounds like he's encouraging people to buy drinks inside as off-license sales and go out and drink it outside, and it can't be stopped. I questioned actually whether they should be allowed to sell off sales alcohol to be drunk outside the premises. That seems like he's trying to get around the rules. I found his demeanour actually rather upsetting, and I think the comments before about the trust between us as neighbours and him has broken down during this meeting. I feel his presenting changes at the last minute is a tactic that I've seen many times before in many businesses that I've been involved in. It's a rather dirty trick. We don't have time to properly consider it. We don't have time to check whether his statements as to what's law and not law is correct. And unfortunately, I don't trust him. And I feel really, really uncomfortable that downstairs under my home, we're on the first floor, we're a few feet away from where these people are drinking. You imagine that. We're sitting on our balcony and there were 50, 60 people at 10:30 the other night, drinking and chatting and having a great time. Terrific, but we didn't buy this flat to be on top of a pub. If we wanted that, we would have gone somewhere else. It's really upsetting our enjoyment of our living here. And it's just very, very sad and very upsetting for all of us.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McDonnell. I see that Mr. Bailey's camera is now on. Do you
I need to make the point. I need to make the point. Luckily for Mr. McDonnell, you do have an independent legal advisor who can advise you when you retire as to whether or not I'm misleading anybody in any way about the law.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, I think I've given everyone the opportunity to comment on some of the amendments that have been suggested, and opportunity as well to seek clarification about some of the issues that have been raised. And just to reassure all as well that you will all have some time to sum up, and where you will have further opportunity to raise further questions, unless it's in response to some of the most recent comments. Councillor Murphy?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I'm afraid that Karen McDonald's question wasn't answered. The question was very specific of, could we confirm please that the outside catering should terminate at 8:30 for 9 as for the previous license? If Mr. Bailey could tell us if that's the case, that would be really appreciated. I think the second point is one I have to agree with Mr. McDonnell on, but one of the big issues for residents and for me as a user of Riverside Studios is vertical drinking, and it now appears to be that a solution is in place, which would be for this committee to prevent off sales, that they should only be on sales at Riverside Studios. That way we won't have people going into the studios, picking up a cocktail in a cocktail bar, and going outside to drink it, or picking up a beer and going outside to drink it. So perhaps the committee could look at stopping all off sales. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Murphy. Mr. Bailey's a specific question was asked. Can you please respond to the question?
Yes, of course, Chair. Chair, in relation to the off sales, unfortunately for Councillor Murphy and Mr. McDonnell, Boris Johnson and central government have decided that off sales shall be mandated for all on sales premises. So unfortunately, the committee's got no power over that. The Business and Planning Act requires that these premises shall have off sales. In relation to the external area, the existing license already permits the premises to be used until 2100. We are simply seeking parity with Sam's, which has a license outside till 2200. So it's clearing the tables and chairs by 2200 and finishing licensable activity outside by 2130. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. And the last hand that I can see raised is Mr. Johnson. And after that, I'm going to go back to members of the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bayliss has said that I'm going back to clause 38, which I think really needs to be reinstated or kept. He did state that it is a door from Sam's restaurant, which is correct, but it is directly linked to Riverside Studios and Riverside Studios are their landlord. So I think not only for now, but for the future, because Sam's has accepted the 10 o'clock time, I think it should be kept in the agreement that Riverside Studios abide by that as well, not just for now, but for the future, because Sam's may move, they may take over that area, and then they, under their license, they will have access to that door.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Well, Chair, I'm afraid it's an unenforceable condition. It doesn't relate to our premises. We can't enforce it. It's not an appropriate condition for the license for the Riverside Studios because it's not part of our premises.
Okay, we know your comment. Okay, I would now like to go back to
yeah, I'm sorry.
Councillors.
Sorry to interrupt. I wonder if it's possible to have a 5-minute comfort break, Chair, for a couple of my clients who are with me. Would that be possible?
Yes, of course. I'm happy to adjourn for 5 minutes. Is 2016. Let's come back at 2021, please.
We don't seek to.
And I think the point is the Arts Council that sees it.
Okay, all is 2021. If you can hear me, please, can we resume? Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the clients for the break. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bear with me a second. We're waiting for Councillor Smith. Great. So we're all here. Okay. Thank you very much. As I said before we adjourn for 5 minutes, I would now like to invite members of the committee, please. Have you got further questions, comments on what has been raised and discussed so far this evening? Please, Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. I just had, so I appreciate the new conditions and things that have been suggested, and I know we've talked a lot about those. There was just one I wanted to check on the provision of late night refreshment indoors. There is a non-standard timing, and it says terminal hour should be 1 for the private and pre-booked function. Is that going to go under this new the new proposal that you mentioned at the beginning of your submission?
Yeah, so private pre-booked functions go completely. There is no extension to one whatsoever. So the only extension, if you like, in terms of introducing late night refreshment is midnight for hot and cold, hot drink and food.
Okay. So the party bit goes. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Nothing else from me, Chair, at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I can see Councillor Thorley has got his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just one final, it's really a comment from me. It's directed at Mr. Bayliss.
Yeah.
Clearly, to me, it seems there has been quite a significant breakdown between the premises you're representing and the local residents, and indeed Councillor Murphy. It would seem to me, given what you're trying to do, is put forward a licence that you believe is robust and actually enables your client to exercise their role as responsibly as possible. Would it perhaps be sensible as a gesture of goodwill, given you have an existing licence, we're looking for relatively minor variations, to perhaps consider pulling this and coming back when you could submit more fully and in more detail exactly what you're proposing? Because there are quite understandable concerns and references regarding what exactly we're doing with vertical drinking and so on. I appreciate that is up to you and up to your client, but I think it certainly would be a very strong gesture to make. I think it would certainly help improve the relationship between yourselves and nearby residents. So that would just be my final comment on this before we move to summing up this. This space, no need to respond right away, because I appreciate you need to speak to your clients, but that would just be my final comment.
I would need to speak to the clients, and can I just thank you in particular for the engagement you've helped us with this evening. It's been, I think your questions in particular have been very helpful and insightful. So thank you for that. I will take instructions on that point. I don't hold out any hope, but I will take instructions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thorley. I would now like to invite, if there are no further comments or questions, and I know you've made a suggestion, Councillor Thorley, so I don't know if Mr. Bayliss needs some time to discuss with his clients.
I have discussed, Chair, thank you, yeah. The view is that we won't get any further forward. We'll be involved in another can of worms, and I do know, I mean, I haven't been involved in it myself, but I do know the client, Mr. Lancaster in particular, has had discussions with Councillor Murphy and a number of the leading local residents that you've heard from tonight. And our feeling is that we'd like you to determine this application as it stands.
I'm sorry, that's
Councillor Murphy.
inaccurate.
Councillor Murphy.
Sorry, Councillor. I'm sorry, Councillor. When a lie is told that I have had interaction with an individual, I am not prepared to let that go. I'll suggest, Mr. Bayliss, you check back with your people.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. You'll have an opportunity to come back to the meeting, please, when I invite you to sum up, please. And well, not the comments as well. Okay. I think I'm moving on now to the summing up then. Please, can the parties sum up as briefly as possible? We've had nearly 2 hours of this committee with opportunity to comment and seek clarification on some aspects of the application. And however, you now have an opportunity to sum up. You've heard some of the comments that have been raised and the responses that have been made as well on behalf of the applicant's representative, and this opportunity to make one last comment in relation to the application. So can we please sum up in the same order that that you did at the beginning? First of all, we've got the licensing officer, Ms. Maria Dimitru. Is there anything that you wish to add, Ms. Dimitru?
Nothing further from licensing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite residents that spoke earlier. And if you bear with me just a second. First of all, I would like to invite Ms. Shirley Cooper, please. You have up to 2 minutes to sum up, but if you want to keep it shorter, that will also be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, all I'm asking really is that we don't allow Riverside Studios to become an independent drinking establishment. I understand that under the current legislation they are allowed to, but I would implore them not to. And that's still different from allowing it as part of an ongoing license. The hot drink and food between 11 and midnight, we know from Riverside Studios, that's so that they can get people to stay there longer after events such as plays and films. We don't want people staying after plays. We would like them to leave so that we don't have a mass of people leaving that establishment at midnight and disturbing our residents as they walk and drive through our estate. So all I'm asking for is can we please stick to what was agreed 2 years ago? Allow drinking by people within the cinema and in intermissions of plays, fine, no problem. But please don't agree to any of these other provisions that will just make life much, much worse for our residents. I've said everything else before, so I won't repeat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and can I now invite Ms. Jane Bain, please? Is Jane with us?
Hi, right. I've really got nothing to add apart from what Shirley's just said. Riverside's activities really need to be in line, and in terms of people coming and going and all the rest of it, as far as possible, they need to be in line with all the other premises in the area. We have so much noise. We don't need noise from Riverside Studios happening an hour later or 2 hours later than it happens from all the other premises. Everybody needs to be able to get some sleep. Mr. Bayless has actually been quite insulting to residents today. We have legitimate concerns and we're not all total idiots. I know we're not licensing lawyers like he is, but he could treat us with a little bit more respect. And I don't care if he says, okay, well, we won't let them drink after 11 o'clock, but we need to have the whole activities of that premises controlled so it minimizes the impact on the local community. It's supposed to be there as much as anything else for the community. And at the moment, it seems to be working against the community. And that really annoys me. We were all very supportive when they were trying to put their plans through. And they seem to have rubbed their hands together and say, oh, goody, 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 right, now we can forget about the residents. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bain. I would like to invite Nikki Grant. Is Nikki Grant still with us? I think Nikki is no longer with us. I'm sorry, I'm just checking my screen.
I saw she dropped a message saying she had to leave, Chair.
Great, thank you. I would now like to invite Mary Stowe, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say that I think that you and your fellow committee members have a very, very difficult task this evening, because I'm very confused by all these new, I don't know, conditions, removal of conditions, things being, and all I can say is that as far as we as residents are concerned, this is typical of the contempt with which the Riverside Studios, I'm afraid, and I'm very sad to say this, treat local residents. heard talk of meetings which I've never heard about, and I don't, there's been no engagement whatsoever. We just get every few years, it seems, another licensing application. And all I would say is that in terms of public safety, more people, more alcohol, more food, more parties and later hours in this very busy area is just a disaster waiting to happen. And to say nothing of the queues for this proposed passenger and cycle ferry terminal, which is ridiculously situated right in front of the entrance to the Riverside Studios. So please, can you refuse this application? Specifically about condition 38, because I know that that's a very important issue for residents of Chancellor's Wharf. I would just say that it is perfectly clear in the current licence to a lay person like me, which is that basically there should be no access from the Riverside Studios building, whether it's from Sam's or from the Riverside Studios, out into Crisp Walk through the door on that side of the building. It's not difficult. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for getting all these comments. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Ms. Owen. Thank you very much for keeping to the 2 minutes. Appreciated. Miss Anne Costain, please. Miss Anne Costain. Ms. Costain, you are muted, so please unmute.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come back. I just wanted to reiterate my concerns about the cocktail bar in the River Room, and I would like a condition, please, to have access only from the interior of the building and not from the Thames path, because I don't think they will be able to control it. I'm also concerned about the extension of the tables outside, and not the numbers, but the actual geographic location of them. I would like to make sure, and I think this has been said, that clauses 44 and 48 are reinserted. And of course, there's a huge area about compliance. And we've listed a number of things that haven't happened, like quarterly meetings. But I think there are also other things like condition 17, their traffic policy, because we know there's been blocking of the highway in Crisp Road, and also condition 18 about maintaining the adjacent area where they don't observe the 20-metre rule. So I think that all of those need to be looked at quite carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Costain. Okay, I will now like to invite Karen McDonald, please.
Hello, yes. The big difference, of course, between a pub, Wetherspoons, or any other pub, including the pubs along the riverfront, such as the Dove, are that in the case of Riverside Studios, we live above Riverside Studios, as do, and there are many, many residents in the adjacent blocks as well. And that means that I would really suggest that we do not extend the licensing for external eating and drinking beyond 9 p.m. because the residents in the area will be severely impacted because we live so close. This is not the case in most pubs and restaurants in this area. And I would really ask you to consider that. And I would also like to request that off sales should not be extended beyond the government allowance for COVID. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm now like to invite Mr. Fred Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reiterate what's been said, that I'd like this this license to be rejected. We've heard a lot about how they have been flaunting some of the restrictions that were in the original licensing application. And this is whilst we're still in the COVID period. After the 19th of July, when it's a free-for-all, I hate to think what will happen in this area because of the disruption and the noise. And I'd also like to suggest that Mr. Bayliss comes down to talk to us himself in future rather than doing it through his client. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I would now like to invite Mr. Peter Lovell, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to say that this licensing process has been very different from the last one we had with Sam's Riverside, and I think this is a lot of this is down to very poor communication between Riverside Studios and us residents. Yeah, Sam, although he was closed, he managed to have his quarterly meetings. He did them over Zoom, a similar system that we're using now. So when he did put his application in, he'd already had time, he'd already spent time talking to residents and getting feedback. The representative from Riverside Studios, I'm not going to name him because I'm a little insulted by his behavior, has made some claims which I noticed that Councillor Murphy has already called out, and I will call them out as well, that they had made no attempt to talk to me. They'd made no attempt to have a group meeting, and I didn't come to this with a negative view. I made comments about the license application. I was neither for it nor against it, but I have to say that he's really turned me against it, and it's disappointing because Riverside Studios is a great concept. I remember it in its previous guise, and I was very keen to see it. I'm still very keen to see it succeed. But I would suggest, if there are Riverside Studios staff listening to this, that they get better representation. And thank you very much for giving me the time to speak, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lovell. Okay, I would now like to invite Councillor Murphy, please, to sum up.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just...
Sorry, Chair, you've missed one objector. There's Philip McDonald to speak as well. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Charles, and apologies, Mr. McDonald, and apologies, Councillor Murphy.
I'm happy for Mr. McDonald to come in, then I'll go after Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Apologies for missing you, Mr. McDonald. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, there are many issues with the application, as we've heard today. I think the point to remember is the existing license is okay. The existing license has been fine, and we spent a lot of time getting that right. You and your team got it right. As I say, I've been in the film and television industry all my life. I've been on the board of a film studio. I've been doing productions. I've rented the Riverside Studios on many occasions. My daughters have appeared in opera there. I want it to succeed, but the way they're behaving is just completely unnecessary. They don't need to do this. It is completely unnecessary. The existing license is fine, but what I would ask is that we do police the fact that they are not complying with the existing license. And surely it is completely inappropriate to allow people to change their license when they aren't even complying with the current license. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Councillor Murphy, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Can I just state out the change to section 48 that I believe has been agreed, but I just want to make it absolutely clear that it should read as follows. The outside seating area shall be separated from the public highway by a screen or rope barrier whilst licensing activities are taking place. I just wanted to make sure that that was there.
Absolutely. Can I just say, Councillor Murphy, absolutely and unequivocally, I'm happy to accept that as a condition.
Thank you. I've been quite shocked, I think, tonight. We have here Riverside Studios comparing itself to Sam's, which is a restaurant. It's not an entertainment venue. It's not a theatre. And asking for similar treatment, and I don't understand why. We have here a studio and entertainment complex in the middle of a residential area where a ferry pier is likely to go right outside. And they seem to believe that consulting with residents is just, to quote, digging up a can of worms. And you have to ask, how can something call itself a community area or community theatre, community hub, if talking to people is digging up a can of worms? The restaurant next door, Sam's, doesn't seem to have that problem of digging up a can of worms. It seems to have a very productive relationship with the residents around. And I think tonight the pugnacious approach that's been demonstrated clearly shows that this is not an organisation that can be trusted. I've been told tonight that I've had meetings I've never had. It's an outrageous lie. I've been told tonight that they didn't put the ropes out because of COVID. Really? Is that the way that we should be treated as some sort of imbecile? I go down there almost every day and I see what happens when it was closed with COVID and now that it's open. There needs to be a degree of respect, I think, that's got to come forward. I would like to agree with one of the previous requests that, as Mr. Bayliss has informed us, that Mr. Johnson has changed the law on off sales, and that now if you have an on sales, you can have an off sales. Perhaps we should make a change to the license that off sales are stopped, so that when this piece of interim legislation by the government falls, then we will not have any problem with off sales and drinking outside. We won't have a problem with people taking their drinks outside because they won't be allowed to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murphy. I would now like to invite Mr. Bayliss, please. And Mr. Bayliss, I'm trying to be fair and just here, and I'm going to give you the exact amount of time that I've given to other parties, and you've got up to 16 minutes.
Chair,
if you want to use that time.
I won't take all your time. First of all, I want to, can I just apologise to the residents if they felt that my approach this evening has been unduly pugnacious or combative. You and your colleagues, Councillor Thorley and Councillor Smith, will be well used to dealing with lawyers who present applications. And I hope I haven't overstepped the mark or dealt with this application in any way that I wouldn't deal with any other application on behalf of a client, or in any other way that other lawyers wouldn't have appeared before the committee. So although the legislation says this should be the nature of a discussion, you are a quasi-judicial body, and I approach these proceedings with my lawyer's hat on, if you like. So apologies to residents who have misunderstood my approach. But of course, it's my job to represent my clients as best I can. Mr. Lovell and a number of the residents have talked about the fact they haven't been approached individually. We couldn't approach hundreds of residents individually. I'm told by my clients that Mr. Lovell lives in Queen's Wharf, and Queen's Wharf Residents Association were approached, and if they don't approach all their residents to talk to them and get their views, well, that's not really our fault. I also want to apologise to Councillor Murphy if he felt that I'd misrepresented.
Whose fault is it then? I mean, Sam's managed to have a Zoom meeting, and you're saying that by sending a message to the Residents Association, that's the equivalent. Apologies, Chair. I'll go away.
I also want to apologise to Councillor Murphy if he felt that I had indicated that he'd had meetings with my clients. I didn't indicate that at all. My instructions are that he certainly had engagement with my clients, either through email or other types of engagement. But I fully accept that Councillor Murphy has not had any meetings with my clients in relation to this application. We're perfectly entitled to amend the application at whatever stage we want to. And it was as a result of my advice to clients and meeting them today and going through all the residents' representations that we felt that it was appropriate to make the amendments that we have made. And as a result of those amendments, the reality of this application is that there is no extension of any licensable activity at all. The terminal hour for alcohol remains at 11. The terminal hour for regulated entertainment remains at midnight. We have a license already until midnight. So the introduction of late night refreshment until midnight doesn't exceed any of the existing hours. It just allows hot food or hot drink to be consumed after a meal in the restaurant, but before the regulated entertainment ends. And we feel that this is an approach which is moderate and considered and does not and will not impinge on the concerns that the residents have. I've specifically invited the clients to consider no vertical drinking. I understand one of the residents was concerned about my parallel with Wetherspoons. I wasn't trying to start a class war. The parallel I was trying to draw was when you go to Wetherspoons, there is a lot of vertical drinking at these premises, as you know very well. These are not premises that want to have that type of activity or vertical drinking at all. It's sit down with your friends and your family at a table, waiter waitress service. And again, I want to emphasize there is no increase in capacity at all. So in terms of impact on the licensing objectives, no increase in hours, no increase in capacity, no effective increase or impact on the licensing objectives. The premises operate as a charity.
You are increasing the hours outside. Please give us the truth.
Please, Mr. McDonald, please allow Mr. Baylis to sum up.
I'm sorry.
There is no increase in the hours in terms of licensable activity, which is permitted by the current license. In terms of what is actually permitted, I've advised the clients to drop the 1 a.m. for the private pre-book functions. We understand the concerns the residents had about that. That can be dealt with by TENS or by other means. And so the changes to the license incrementally are very small. They allow for more flexibility. I want to come back to the change in the way that we want to operate the bar restaurant area, because moving away from ancillary food to food available doesn't mean we suddenly turn into a bar where everyone's sitting down. What it does mean is it gives you more flexibility. And the example I used earlier on, I'm going to repeat. I come into the premises with my wife. I just want a glass of wine. She wants a full meal. If I don't want to eat, we can't stay. And so it gives the amount of flexibility that we need. We're a charity. Food and beverage has never been higher than 24% of our total income. We do not want it to become more than 24% of our income. I've offered you a condition if you want it, that the sale of alcohol shall always be ancillary to the main activity of the premises as an entertainment or cultural centre. If you want that condition, I'm more than happy that you add it to the licence. There's been a lot of talk about the old condition 38 and the access to the public highway, Crispin Walk. I'm going to leave that to Greta to advise you about, unless she wants to particularly to talk to me about it now, a bit before you retire. From my perspective, purely with my lawyer's hat on, it is an unlawful condition because you cannot prevent access to a public highway, even more so because you cannot condition a licence over which we have no control. That doorway comes out of Sam's. It doesn't come out of the Riverside Studios, and therefore it's not an enforceable condition as far as we're concerned. Chair, I don't think there's anything else I really wanted to draw your attention to at this stage. I mean, we've gone over all of the proposals now to everyone's death, I hope. I don't know if Greta, there's any legal issues you want to discuss with me before the committee retires.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. Gert, actually, is there any particular area that you wish to ask about?
Just one thing I had. You mentioned previously that the reason why you applied for a new license rather than a variation to the existing license was because some of the conditions were not enforceable. And from my understanding of tonight's hearing and listening to the comments and everything, I understand there's only one condition in relation to the access to the highway. Any other conditions that you felt that were not enforceable or unreasonable?
Greta, without going through them in detail, I can't recall. That's the only one that comes to mind, but there were others that we were concerned about, I think. Oh yes, the the condition in relation to the fact that alcohol can only be consumed ancillary to a meal effectively means that people in the cinema or in the studio theatres can't take a drink into the performance.
I understood that, and you suggested condition number 34.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, there's no reason why a new license shouldn't be applied for, because if I'd applied for a variation, I would be potentially inviting the committee to add conditions to that license which might not be appropriate. So we're entitled.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I clarify with you 2 more conditions that haven't been raised to tonight's hearing? Condition 17 of the existing license and condition 22 that you have removed from the new application.
Yeah.
So condition 22, the committee previously included capacity on various studios, the event space. So why it has been removed?
Because a lot of those capacities were wrong. We've recently had a new fire risk assessment produced, and in my submission, it's inappropriate for a license to have capacity conditions which effectively should reflect the fire risk assessment under the Fire Precautions Act and not the Licensing Act. And we've had a new fire risk assessment produced today. I'm very happy to lodge a copy of that fire risk assessment with the committee to be annexed to the license if you request it.
Perfect, thank you very much. There is no need, as long as the relevant authorities have the fire risk assessment in the council. And the condition number 17 as well hasn't been mentioned with tonight's hearing.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Greta, go on.
No, it's fine. I'm not aware what is the technical standards of places of entertainment. But I would like you to explain why it has been removed. So it's
of course. So the technical standards of place of entertainment conditions were conditions which previously applied under the London Government Act 1963 or the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1968, and they were conditions which used to apply to public entertainment licenses before the new Licensing Act came into force. And so, again, that's another unlawful condition which shouldn't have been attached to this license in my submission. It's old legislation, effectively.
And another condition that I'm from my notes, condition number 33 of this existing license, it requires the premises license holder or the premises to display the conditions of the license in a position when it can be seen by the staff members. Why it has been, you have decided to delete that, please?
Simply because there are so many conditions on the license. It would take 3 A4 notices to stick it up, but if you want it, I'm happy to have it in there. Equally, we could have a condition which could say that staff will be trained in relation to the conditions of the license. I don't know. I'm in the committee's hands about that. If you want to, if you
I'll
want
make a note. That's very helpful.
I'm happy with 33. If you want a different one, I'm happy with that. It's up to you.
Okay, Greta.
Thank you very much for clarifying.
Greta, was there anything in particular about Condition 38, which has been the nub of some concern with the Highways Act and the neighbours this evening?
I think we need to review the plan again to see whether it's part of the premises or not.
Understood. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gerta, and thank you very much, Craig as well. I have to say I welcome the last 2 minutes more convivial and diplomatic approach. Okay, thank you very much. The committee will now retire to take its decision. You are all welcome to remain in the meeting to hear the committee's decision. However, this may take some time. If you don't want to wait, a summary decision will be published on the council's website tomorrow morning. Can I please ask members to turn off their video and mute their microphones and join the private meeting room for deliberations? Thank you.
Chair, everyone's back. You can proceed with your decision.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you all for your patience this evening. I'm now going to read out the decision. The committee has considered an application for the grant of a new premises license under the Licensing Act 2003. In summary, the committee has decided, after taking into account all of the individual circumstances of this case and the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives, to reject the application. A copy of this committee's full decision, including its reasons and the full text of the conditions added to the license, will be sent to the parties forthwith. If the applicant is unhappy with the decision, they are entitled to appeal to the Magistrates' Court within 21 days from the date of notification of the full decision. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this evening or watching tonight's meeting. I noticed as well that we had people taking part from New York, so thank you all for your participation this evening. A summary of the decision will be published on our website, and a full decision letter setting out the reasons for the decision will be sent to all parties in due course. Thank you very much.
Thank you.